Hi, lovely ladies from DUP. I'm going to give our lesson this month, December 2020, on Christmases Remembered. I decided to take it from a different book than the one given to us because I really liked some of these pioneer stories of Christmases. So let's get started. The first story I'm going to tell you about is about a girl actually named Mary Pratt Parrish. And her story has to do with the song, Come, Come Ye Saints. Most of us don't think of that as a Christmas song, but I want you to listen to what Mary said. All right. It was not until she was in the 4th grade, Mary Pratt Parrish tells us, before she learned that Come, Come Ye Saints was not a Christmas song, but it was to her. Before anyone was allowed to open a present, before the cakes and the pies and the other food, the family would gather together and her father would recount the story of Christ's birth. The family would then join him at the piano. He would strike a chord and they would sing all 4 verses of Come, Come Ye Saints, singing reverently and with feeling. She never thought to question why they sang that hymn. She said, quote, "It did not enter my mind that it was not the usual thing to do. But when Mary's 4th grade teacher asked her to choose a Christmas song to sing before dismissing for the holidays, she found that her suggestion of Come, Come Ye Saints was greeted with laughter. The teacher chided her, saying, 'You know that is not a Christmas song. Let us sing Jingle Bells instead.' Mary held back her tears until she got home. And when she got home, she clasped her mother's arms and said, 'It is a Christmas song, isn't it?' 'Yes,' her mother replied, 'it is a Christmas song and has been to us since the first Christmas in the Salt Lake Valley. That was when your great-great-grandmother sang it around the flagpole in the center of the old fort.'" And then her mother related this story, which I'm going to read for you. "My great-grandmother, Mary Wood, was born and raised in Ingham, Lincolnshire, England, and there met and married Paul Littleton. It was their intent never to leave Ingham, for they loved it there, but they did receive the gospel from 2 Mormon missionaries. 2 months after they were baptized, Mary and Paul and their children sailed for America, joining the saints. So here's their first Christmas. Mary's first Christmas in America was spent on the road. The weather was cold, the road was rough. While traveling to Nauvoo, Mary determined that henceforth her family would celebrate Christmas much as she had in England, with wreaths, Yule logs, Father Christmas, and Christmas carols. Now comes her second Christmas in America. It was spent in a wagon box over which Paul had built a roof. He had placed a fireplace at the end of the wagon box. This was after they had fled into Nauvoo for safety, but Mary was determined that their next Christmas would be different. Now Mary's 3rd Christmas in America found her and her children alone in winter quarters. Paul was several hundred miles away, walking west with the Mormon battalion. There was no caroling, no Father Christmas. Instead, there was fasting and prayer, as Mary's 8-year-old son was near death with black canker. He survived, but 25 others died in winter quarters that Christmas day. Now let's go to her 4th Christmas in America. This time they had relative peace. But it's still not the kind of Christmas that she envisioned for her family. That would come later. Christmas was on a Saturday that year, and it was treated much like any other day by the almost 2,000 people who were there. The day began with a thunderous boom from the old cannon that had been pulled across the plains by the first company to enter the valley, and it had been placed in the middle of the fort. Throughout the rest of the day, parents and children and neighbors and friends greeted each other with warm smiles, handshakes, and jovial words to the cannon's roared message, "Merry Christmas." Other than that, people labored to complete the north addition to the fort so families could have shelter and do other necessary work in safety. It was the next day, Sunday, December 26th, when the people more properly celebrated Christmas in 1847. Early on, the people gathered at the flagpole where prayers were offered and words of thanksgiving and praise were pronounced. They sang song, including a heartfelt rendition of Come, Come Ye Saints, a song written on the trail, which had become an anthem to them. Therefore, the song was a traditional favorite of pioneer Christmas celebrations. From that time henceforth, Mary Littleton desired to hold fast to the time her heart felt the gladness of that first Christmas in the valley. To that end, she established the custom of beginning each Christmas day with the story of Christ's birth. Afterward, Paul would tell the story of their first Christmas in the valley and the singing of Come, Come Ye Saints. "Let us sing it now," he would say, "and let us sing it reverently and with feeling, that the Lord will know we are singing a song of dedication to him." "So you see," Mary's mother said, the day she ran home from school, to members of our family, Come, Come Ye Saints is a Christmas song. Families often have something special at Christmas that's their very own. It might be a special wreath for the door. Others have a special dinner or dessert. Some have a special ornament for the tree or a special story they like to tell. We have a special song. This has been so ever since that first Christmas celebration in the valley of the Great Salt Lake. To this day, in this book, it said that Mary's descendants have kept up that tradition, and they sing, "Come, come ye saints," and they call it Mary's traditional Christmas. I thought that was a very sweet story of one of the early pioneers. Now let's move on to another story. This one is about Mary, another Mary, Mary Reiser Gallagher, and she talks a little bit about her Christmas. The picture right here on the right is of her father, Henry Reiser, and let me just read a little bit of what she came to say. This was while they were in the city. Keeping in mind it wasn't exactly a city that we know now, it was more of a fort before the city was built. She related, "Let me live again those happy days in the little 3-room adobe house across the street west of the old fort. Let me see again my sweet-faced, patient mother, Magdalene Schneider Reiser, and my energetic, ambitious father, Henry Reiser, as they secretly prepared our Christmas. I was the youngest of 7, but 4 of them on the hillside lie," meaning they obviously had died. "Only 1 brother and 1 sister remained. And they came from the Alps in Switzerland. And so they had a lot of Christmas traditions centered around the Swiss traditions." She talks about the dolls that she had. "The little rag doll that mother made out of a worsted dress thrilled my childish heart." Then she said later came the yellow-haired China doll. So if you look at the pictures here, there's a bisque head doll on the right. And that might have been something like what she had for her China doll. And she got a little slate with a frame and a few other things. And then she talked about the last doll she received would be very much like the one on the left, a wax head doll. She said, "My last doll, a beautiful big wax one with flaxen hair, seated in a little wooden carriage was a priceless treasure for many years." And then here is something that was really quite cute. So her father was a jewelry maker at the time, a watchmaker and a jeweler by trade. And so she said that their tree, their first gay with pink and yellow and blue paper chains and tassels, English walnuts father gilded and put toothpick stems on to tie onto the tree, popcorn streamers from every branch, and the golden star on the peak at the top. Wasn't it gorgeous? And then she talked about what she got. And keeping in mind that this was a man that had 3 wives and 15 children that he had to support. And he was able to give them some of these wonderful treasures. It says, "We were welcomed to each other's homes as they were plural wives and things with the children. The children were all welcome at each other's homes and given sweet cakes made from sweetened dough, braided or twisted into doll shapes, and then sprinkled with sugar and currants." This part I thought was pretty funny. "Christmas season would not be complete without a number of Indians knocking at the door and asking for Christmas gifts or food or clothing, plainly letting us know what they wanted. They were always treated well, and we became fast friends." Okay, our next story comes to us. Oh, let me just mention these dolls. These are a couple more dolls. These are paper mache dolls. So the hands and the faces. I am not sure if the bodies were, it wasn't very clear on that, but very elaborately dressed as the mothers would sew the dresses for these dolls. All right, our next story comes from this little girl. Her name is Matilda Stolworthy Saker, and she tells the story of when Lorenzo Young played Santa Claus for them. So let me relate some of that. "In order that you may understand what a few gifts at Christmas time meant to a group of pioneer children, I will describe the community and the conditions under which the people lived. My father was foreman over the United Order cattle for 12 years, and the cattle ranch was disbanded, and so they had to find another means of living. And they came to this wonderful valley. It was shaped like a horseshoe, had a stream down the center, and they built some log homes, and then they returned to grab their families. In the spring of 1886, father and several others loaded up their wagons for more pioneering, Then with father, mother, my sister, 4 years old, myself, and father's other wife, Hannah, we started out, and they arrived at Huntington in Emery County. Can you imagine a Christmas under such conditions? Mother was listening to the children's prattle about Christmas, and all of them were praying that Santa would find them. The day before Christmas, the children were told to go play and not come in the house and bother. We all ganged up and played steel sticks, run sheep run, or anything to keep moving so we could stay warm. When we were running, we would have a chance to smell something real good as some of the mothers would come out and run home with something very nice in their aprons. The mothers had mixed, rolled, cut, and baked gingerbread dolls, dogs, cats, and horses with raisins for eyes. They were made out of bran gingerbread with just enough precious flour to hold it together. The men were busy making chairs out of willows and cradles for dolls. The women made large rag dolls with eyes out of buttons and used yarn for hair. On that Christmas morning, there were rag dolls and cradles, gingerbread dolls, and big sticks of molasses candy. Father went outdoors, and what a surprise. Sorry, let me just fix that. Okay, here's the surprise. There in the doorway sat a great big new rocking chair with a bundle in it. Father brought the bundle in, then the chair. He picked Mother up and sat her in it. In the bundle was 40 yards of gray linseed, a bundle of floss, 40 pounds of factory, 10 pounds of sugar, a lot of dried fruit, 6 papers of tea, a lot of nuts, and 10 pounds of store candy. Just think, lumps of clear candy with flowers through it, striped candy, pretty lumps that looked like little cakes, and 2 white candy bird nests with little eggs and a little bluebird inside. It was the most beautiful thing we had ever seen. There were 2 boxes with our names on them. When we opened them, there were 2 dolls all dressed up, one with dark hair and a pink dress, the other had light hair and a blue dress. They could open and shut their eyes. These were the first dolls we had ever seen. There was a letter in the bottom of the bundle from great-grandfather Lorenzo Young, and this is what he wrote. Dear Lydia, I cannot help worrying about you away off there, wondering if you're cold and hungry. When Brother Oliphant was going through Huntington to his home, I hired him to take a few things for you for Christmas, hoping for you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And here's a little side note to that story. They were able to share a lot of the Christmas things that they said. They said, using the material sent in the bundle, Mother and Hannah made them each a dress cut princess style. My sister and I each had 2 slips and 2 new Sunday dresses. Mother embroidered them, and we were so proud of our new dresses. All the women and children were barefooted, so Sister Marshall cut and sewed the tops for shoes, and Brother Marshall tanned a horsehide and put soles on the slippers. Everyone had new shoes. Keep in mind, this is not everyone in their family. This is everyone in their small town. But you will say, did you eat all that candy alone? We did not. Inside of an hour on that Christmas morning, a cup of white sugar, some dried fruit, a spoonful of tea, some nuts, and 2 pieces of candy for each child was in every home in the valley. The candy was so pretty and too precious to eat, so the children just sat and looked at it and tried to see who could keep it the longest. After we had been to each home, Mother called my sister and myself and said, how would you like to take your bird nest to John and Delight? They were 2 children who had been badly burned and were still in bed. She said, you have your dolls and you can run and play. You will never know how badly we wanted to keep the bird nests. So we looked at them and then at Mother, so sweet and sad. And away we went. Never will I forget, as long as I live, the look of joy on those children's eyes as we put the nests in their hands, and how the weeping mother hugged and kissed us, although she could not speak. That was the happiest Christmas of our lives. Surely God had heard our prayers and whispered to great-grandfather of our needs. Lorenzo D. Young was great-grandfather to every child in that little town ever after. What a sweet story. Now our next story will be about Helen Vancott Madsen. And I picked this one because it had to do with a pandemic that was happening in the early 1900s. And I thought, how fitting, almost 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago, they were facing some of the same things, but their conditions were a little bit different. So let me relate to you this story of Helen Vancott Madsen. So in the winter of 1917, she was only 9 years old, and the Spanish flu epidemic had swept through the country. And she said her father and her mother both got it at the same time, and they were both very ill. And some of her brothers and sisters also contracted the Spanish flu. She had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and the youngest was only a little baby. And so the grandmother was called in to help out, to stay with them and care for them. Does this sound familiar? The schools had closed because of the epidemic. Churches were also closed, and the funerals for those who died were conducted at gravesides. Stores were open, but storekeepers would not allow anyone to enter the store. We would knock at the door and hand him a list of what we needed, and wait for him to gather the items. We would then hand him the money through the doorway, take our items, and leave. Sometimes we were about frozen, waiting in the cold blizzards for our groceries. And then we had a long walk home. Many times we could hardly feel our feet move, and our hands were white with clutching the packages of badly needed necessities. So I think we have a little bit easier than them, don't we? Here's the part I thought was very fitting for our time as well. No one was allowed to go anyplace without wearing a gauze mask over their face. Sometimes the masks stuck to our noses with frost, and that was terrible. We even had to wear them in the house to keep the sickness from spreading. So not so very different. Every morning they would wake up and say, "Grandma, who died last night?" It was just such a very common occurrence, such a sad time. And then Christmas comes, and these poor little children are wondering if Santa Claus is going to come. And they asked their grandmother, and she said, "Santa Claus is not coming because of the Spanish flu." So the children were very, very sad, and all she wanted was a little gold signet ring that she had seen in the 15-cent shop, the 15-cent store. And so she wrote a letter to Santa Claus. She said, "I asked him for the little gold signet ring that I had seen in the store. I asked him to bring something for my brothers and sisters. I didn't tell anyone about this letter, and I put it outside by the side of our porch under a rose bush." And she says, "It still brings tears to my eyes to think of it after all these years. Since we didn't have a Christmas tree, Mama gave permission for my brother John to cut down a small tree in our backyard. We brought it in the house, and Grandma showed us how to make daisy chains out of newspaper. We made the paper stick with flour and water. We also had some corn, and we popped it and strung it for the tree. At the very top of the tree, we hung our star. It was the top of a tin can. My little brother thought of that, and his eyes glistened as we hung it. We were so pleased. One of the boys climbed on a chair and hung it on the top branch. And with the light from a 25-watt bulb hung from the ceiling in the kitchen, the star seemed to take on a special brilliance. It was beautiful to us." And then now, just a day or two before Christmas, her father became so ill that he needed to be taken to the hospital by 2 men. He couldn't breathe very well, and Mama was also sick. So they didn't know what to expect. And they had a little baby, and Grandma was there feeding it. She warmed up some milk, and this little girl said, "I fed her, and I felt a little better as she fell asleep in my arms." On Christmas Eve, we sang some Christmas carols with Grandma and went to bed. It was hard to sleep. On Christmas morning, I got up quietly and went out the front door. It was very cold and snowing. The letter that I had left for Santa was gone, and so was the milk and cookie. I felt happy and my stomach quivered. I went to the stockings that were hung across the chair, and in each one was an orange and banana. This was a real once-a-year treat. I felt in the bottom of my stocking, and there in the toe, just as I had dreamed, was a gold signet ring. It was tiny, but it fit my middle finger perfectly. No one can know my joy nor why I had tears. I crept back to bed and said my prayers again. It was a tiny little treasure, but it restored my faith, and I kept it for years. I still have it hidden away. And at this time, her brothers were telling her that there was no Santa Claus. And she was thinking, if I just got that little gold ring, then I know that Santa Claus was real. And so my question to you is, do you believe in Santa Claus after a story like that? And now I'm just going to show you a few things that were in the lesson as I conclude the lesson. If you look on the left, there's Christmas decorations and festivities. There's a beautiful table spread. There's a Christmas tree in the corner. Just a wonderful, wonderful representation of Pioneer Christmas. Now right here is a paper Christmas ornament. And down here on the bottom, you can see that it's got kind of this white, fluffy material. It looks kind of cottony, and some sticks down here that they decorate it with, and they would hang these on their Christmas tree. So it's made out of paper. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was the sleigh and the sleigh bells. And I'll just end with a little tidbit about that. So let me just read you right here. All right. An 1868 article in the Salt Lake newspaper read, Lots of sleighing now. Big sleighs and little sleighs, cutters and bogs, one-horse outfits, and from that up to Wells Fargo and Company's 8-horse institution. The streets are filled with the music of sleigh bells from morning till noon and from noon till night. Although riding in a sleigh was tremendous fun for both the old and young, the growing tradition was not popular with everyone. In fact, in 1859, there was an editorial published. Those who were in the habits of yelling and whooping like savages as they passed through the streets on their nocturnal excursions in sleighs. The editorial called for municipal rules and regulations to curb such brawling in the streets. That didn't stop them from riding their sleighs and jingling their sleigh bells. I just thought that was really funny. Anyway, at this time, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Thanks for enjoying our DUP lesson. And till we meet again, we'll see you next year.